Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Sean Carey, and I'm with.
Dr. Bill Moss.
And we have a very special guest today on the Evolving Practice podcast, one of our dear friends and our personal astrologers, Aleksandra Ceho. She's joining us from Toronto, Canada, and she has so much wisdom to share about all things astrology, mythology. She is an amazing teacher in hermetics. She has deep understanding of tarot and many other things. So we're going to talk about how these things to connect to knowing ourselves and how we can use them as a bridge to healing.
Thank you so much for giving me the honor of joining you guys today. This is going to be super fun.
Awesome. Yeah, we're looking forward to having you. And that's the one part Sean left out, how much fun you are.
Yeah, you're super or the most important part.
Yeah, the most, absolutely.
Spirituality has to have just a little bit of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we both, Dr. Bill and I, have had readings with you, Alex, and your Lauren, your wife, as well as your daughter Ava, have also had readings, right?
Yep, correct. Yep.
Yeah. And I think, Alex, you and I have done maybe like 3 readings together now that you've done for me. So I saved them in a Google Drive file. I have this file, Know Thyself, and it has all these different readings in it. And I'll periodically go back and like listen and relearn things about myself, or there'll be something that you shared that I, am ready to receive at a deeper level. So it's really fun.
That's amazing. I'm glad that you still listen to them. I frequently have people come back to me and tell me, oh my God, Alex, I just listened to it again. And it'll be like 3 years since I did the session for them.
Yeah, it's funny. You said right before we got on, I was like, oh my gosh, you did my daughter's reading like probably 6 months to less than a year into her life. And I'm like, oh, I got to revisit that just to understand it. But I think that gives we just started talking about readings, but I always, astrology is perceived one way in the real world. And I'm sure we're going to talk about this a lot. But the way you approach it is much more outside the box, and it breaks some of the barriers and preconceived notions that people automatically download in their mind of what it is and what it isn't. But could you maybe go into we've all had readings. What does that mean? And then how's that outside of the regular understanding, I guess you could say, of astrology?
Yeah, of course. So if we look at astrology, because it is an ancient practice, if we trace it back through history, most people understand Western astrology, which came from Hellenistic astrology, ancient Greece, which we can actually trace back down through Egypt all the way into ancient Sumeria. And then, of course, there were alternate forms of astrology, for example, in ancient China. And so this is a thousands of year old spiritual science. And the purpose of it was dual. And so the first aspect, which, since we're talking about healing, is the most important here. And that was to know thyself. So just like that folder you were talking about, Sean, the purpose of astrology was to know thyself. And when we look at it in the modern day, most people know their zodiac sign, right? They know their sun sign, and they understand the archetypal box that they're, quote unquote, supposed to live in, right? But there's actually a lot more to it than that. And so when we look back at ancient texts, when we look at Posidonius, who was one of the great Stoic philosophers and an astrologer, when we look at Ptolemy, when we look at many of these ancient authors, Aristotle was a huge astrologer, guided Alexander the Great by utilizing the magic of his astrology chart to success in the world. The whole purpose of it was to know thyself, to be able to embrace the strengths, the gifts, and the attributes that are part of who you are in this life. And so whenever you're getting astrology readings done, they help you, one, to understand what it is, what kind of skill set, what kind of toolbox did you bring in with you when you came into this world? What are the qualities that are your specialty, that are part of your recipe and your life purpose? right? We need to understand these things, because without that understanding of what makes us great, all that's left is the understanding of ego.
Yeah.
And when ego is the only thing we know, and personality is the only thing we know, it's very easy to think poorly of ourselves. And to be limited in terms of what you can accomplish in this world. If you don't know that you could be a master architect because you have strength in mathematics and the ability to plan and schematize things, to put together amazing buildings, what joy is there for you? Right. And if you don't fully know thyself, and I always tell people, to fully know thyself, you need to know what's amazing about you. And yes, of course, you need to know your downfalls. You need to know where your ego can trip you up. But if you don't know both sides of the coin, then you actually don't know yourself.
Yeah.
It's not the whole truth. And we need the truth of who we are if we are going to have joy in our life. Right. And so astrology reveals those gifts, those traits, those skills, those areas of wisdom, and also how we can misunderstand them or utilize them incorrectly because we're filtering those strengths and those qualities through the ego.
Yeah.
Right. And so whenever you get a reading done, you're looking at both sides of the coin.
It's interesting. We just had actually my wife, who works a lot through the mind with counseling in that department, and she was talking about the difference of how a lot of people work on what's wrong with somebody, and like her philosophy or approach comes through this strength-based lens, which says what is right with you. It seems like in mainstream culture, before I knew you or the mysteries, that's what the drama of astrology tends to really focus on, is the fact that almost like the negative side, the vices of the sign, if you will, and how they affect somebody, as opposed to all the great aspects.
It's funny. A long time ago, I lived in California for a short stint, and so I found this astrology club, and I was correcting this woman's chart because she had some incorrect calculations, and and she was giving me flack for it. And I turned to her and I was like, "Why are you being so stubborn about this?" And her response to me was, and this is literally what she did: "I'm a Taurus. I'm supposed to be stubborn."
Yeah.
Now, later on, she came to me and she was like, "Okay, you were right about, correcting the calculation. This makes so much more sense." But it was like you were putting your foot down about something that was actually meant to help you. Right. And so she was buying into the negative stereotype that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you go on Instagram, there are people who make a great living parodying, these stereotypes.
Yeah. Well, we all know that was more the California than the Taurus, right?
Yeah.
Probably.
One of the things I love about astrology, the way that you've taught it with me, Alex, is that no matter what somebody's chart says too, it's like you may have predispositions towards certain things, like everything has a strength and a weakness, if you will. But those weaknesses, it's like those are still things that we can overcome and rise above. And I think that we're meant to, as far as our stars, like we're meant to, we have that influence, but then we can rise up to more of that heavenly state and be able to, that celestial state, and be able to harness the power of that planet and amplify those good qualities and minimize those negative qualities to really master the stars.
Absolutely. Yes, master the stars, right?
Well, master the stars is Alex's business name, right?
Yeah.
Well, that is an ancient philosophy. It really is to master our own stars. And wherever we encounter difficulties in life, the ancient premise behind it, the Hermetic philosophies behind it, was that in spirit, you are a master of this.
Yeah.
And so if we were to think of life as a video game, and you are a master video game player of that kind of video game, whatever it is you're having trouble with, right? So let's say it's relationships. You have a detrimented chart in terms of relationships. But when you come down here, you play the video game on the professional level because you want the challenge. How are you a master of it in spirit if you can't face all the adversity in the physical?
I love that.
Cool. And so for anybody who's encountering a challenge somewhere in life, I really want you to consider that premise that perhaps on some level there is a mastery of this, and that you're just playing the video game on the ultra hard setting. Because when you master that piece, what's left in life to hold you back?
Yeah. Beautiful way to think about it.
Yeah, totally new way to think about it. An empowering way to think about it, because I feel like even when people ask me, it's probably more and more mainstream to be like, well, what is your sign, right? In reference to the sun sign. And I'm always, after knowing you and doing the work, I'm always a little like, okay. You know what?
Which one do you want?
Yeah.
You want my rising sign? You want my moon sign? You want my sun sign?
Right. Well, maybe even you could kind of talk about a little bit of that, because it's so like mainstream to just say, hey, this is my sun sign, and then it's like, oh, I'm a Cancer, and then people are like, you're emotional, blah blah blah, you have a hard shell, can't get in, and you're just all of the things that, right?
The stereotypes. Absolutely.
Yeah, like my wife's a Taurus, and you already went over the stereotype of the Taurus, which is 100% true.
Or we'll edit that part out so she doesn't hear.
But it
Next
is
time you argue, she's going to say, but I'm supposed to be stubborn.
Yeah. But it's interesting. Like as I grew older, I didn't feel as much like the sun sign. And after working with you and going through the Hermetic astrology, it made a lot more sense why I was exemplifying different energies or different aspects of other areas of my chart. So you want to dive into that a little bit?
Oh my gosh. Yes. There's so much I can say here. So first of all, just to your last comment, Bill, we're never just one sign. But that being said, aspects of our chart come into play at different ages. And so, in terms of our growth and our evolution, right, we start off with the sun and the moon sign. And those are the two big aspects, in our infancy and in our childhood, because it is primarily the emotional aspect of the self that we are developing in that moment. And then as we start to hit, our toddler years and we begin to communicate, Mercury starts to come into play. Bringing in our ability to communicate, our ability to think logically, to share those thoughts in some form, whether it is through our words, our facial expressions, our hands, right? And this is why toddlers are often very animated, because they're trying to figure out their style, right? And, as we start to, enter into our preteen and teen years, Venus and Mars come into play. Teaching us about the attraction of the masculine and feminine and how to form genuine bonds and relationships and, what's needed for that. And then when we enter our adult years, Jupiter and Saturn come into play. And they bring to us the concept of growth, philosophy, abundance, but also limitations, how to ground, how to build, how to create structures that create safety and progression in our lives, right? And so our chart is not static. It is dynamic, right? And then on top of it, you have forecasting astrology, which is going to bring different aspects to the forefront, as you continue through life. And so if you have a bunch of things making aspects to Mercury, well, then you may notice the mercurial side of your character coming through more, because that's a part of yourself that's being aspected, and you're asked to be perfect in that moment. Right? So there's that piece to it. But also, who says that we're supposed to only be one archetype?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's such a big thing, because it's so much in astrology, and just the way the world thinks is just we attach to these boxes. And as much as amazing as astrology can be, it can become something that just limits you so much, because you're like, oh, this is my box, and
Right.
Way up.
And it jumped out at me. You're like, oh, we start out in our sun and our moon. And it's like, well, that sounds to me partially like that's, if we're still living there, we're like not nearly evolving to, we're still living in somewhat of an infancy of our full development, if we're not really understanding the aspects or inviting them in to our life as we develop and grow.
Exactly. Right. And, and then the other piece that I was going to say here, we're not just supposed to be one archetype. Right. And, Sean, you're bringing up modern astrology. Oh, 100%. That's marketing. I call modern astrology, everything you find on Instagram, that's marketing. And it's marketing with celestial wrapping.
Yeah.
Right? And so it does become a box, and it does become limiting. But archetypal, in the mystery school, we would call it archetypal magic, is incredibly powerful, because the archetypes that we identify with define the stories that we tell about our lives. Right. And so when we get to know our personal chart, we can come to understand the archetypes that we work with, right? And what kind of story are we telling about each of those archetypes in our life? And so, for example, if someone has Mars in a detrimented position in their life, well, they may not always tell themselves that a story of strength. They may be prone to embracing the victim archetype, right? And so, is that healthy for them? Is there a misunderstanding there? Because you don't always have to have polished abs, tan skin, and walk around in a loincloth to be a warrior.
Is that true?
Right?
Yeah.
You don't have to look like Conan the Barbarian to be a warrior.
100%.
Some of the greatest warriors on the planet. I mean, unfortunately, they're not alive anymore. But Gandhi, there's a warrior, right? Someone who stood up and never gave up.
And talk about embodying multiple archetypes the way he did. The warrior and the teacher and the prophet and the lover and all those things.
Absolutely. Right. And so astrology brings that archetypal magic to life. And what I personally really love about it is it allows you to step outside of yourself and to look at yourself from an objective lens as opposed to a subjective lens. One of the most unhealthy things we do to ourselves is that we take ourselves too seriously. And we are so subjective in our own story that we often cast blame or shame upon ourselves instead of trying to look at something objectively and say, oh, there's a part of myself I don't understand. There's a part of myself that needs a little more development. There's a part of myself that maybe needs a little support. Or there's a part of myself that's actually really awesome that I haven't touched yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely the way you describe it, it sounds like such an expansive thing and an opening to explore as opposed to this confirmation of the self that is very static. And it's I'm having an even though I've heard you talk and we've done charts, I'm having a new experience in that nature where, there's so much more to explore based on the lens that you're describing, as opposed to there's nothing more to explore if this is your list of characteristics of what that means, and then that's just who you are, and then you try to live up to it, because that sure as heck sounds like another mask for another individual to continue to wear, as opposed to this freeing concept that you're describing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other piece, because I understand the appeal of modern astrology of the marketing. I don't want to call it astrology. It's not. It's marketing.
Yeah.
Because if you were to take the ancient astrologers and you were to show them, everything that's going on today, they would just kind of like, do this.
Yeah.
Hang their heads in shame.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was never the purpose. It was something holy and sacred, right?
Yeah.
But I understand the appeal, and the appeal comes from wanting to completely know thyself.
Mm.
And if you are a box, a box is easy to examine.
Mm.
Yeah.
And people aren't always willing, and this is the hard part to accept, but people aren't always willing to do what's necessary to know and express themselves to the greatest degree.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage and bravery.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a willingness to be truthful with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, and also a willingness to consult outside of yourself as well. Royalty always used to have their astrology charts read.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
From the times of Alexander the Great, he had Aristotle as his teacher, who guided him on the magic of his own chart so that he could live up to it.
Mm.
Right. And utilizing Alexander the Great's chart, that was how Aristotle taught him. That was, and that was what guided him on what to teach. What were the areas of wisdom and strength that were part of his nature, and where did he need to be cautioned or taught so that his own nature didn't get carried away with him.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. That's awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's not the only royal to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every royal family on the planet had astrologers who supported members of the royal family, who offered predictions, who of course interpreted their charts, as a means of helping that royalty understand the skill set and the gifts that they bring in with them. Because when you're in a position of that much authority, responsibility, need to care for other people, you need as much of your own strength as you can get.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it can really highlight that subconscious with us of just what we're not seeing, what those weaknesses are. And then so you can have that greater awareness of this is where you need to be supported. This is where you need to lift yourself up.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other piece to astrology, and, this is the piece that often gets kind of overlooked, was that there was also astrological magic, right? And so healing basically was part of the function of the chart.
Yeah.
What are the areas that they are liable to misunderstand things? What are the areas that they are liable to indulge in their shadow? Right? And how can I, working with these celestial forces, help to mitigate that?
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Help reveal those blind spots, help boost their strengths.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like an evolving, I think of like this evolving roadmap of like a journey map. that can help assist in these growth experiences. And, that's why personally I've done, multiple readings like after different years. And, there's this other aspect of astrology. So we've been talking about like the self, and then there's what's going on in the universe and how it influences. Can you touch on the, yes, you can. I can.
Yeah, of course.
The relationship between those two things.
Yeah. So of course you have the natal chart, right? But then the other aspect is forecasting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many forms of forecasting.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have transits, you have progressions, secondary progressions, you name it. There's all kinds of forecasting techniques. And what I love about forecasting, and one of the things that I tell people, when we're working with forecasting, is that it's the wind at your sails.
Mm.
We all have things we want to do in our life. And, if you think of your destination as, as a place across the ocean and you're the sailboat, astrology is the wind that fills your sails.
Mm.
And there are in forecasting, there's primarily two kinds of aspects. You have what are called hard aspects or soft aspects, right? And so if you go and read on the internet, the minute you see a hard aspect, people are like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do this. Don't do that. Run and hide under a rock.
The difference between like a hard and soft aspect?
Yeah. So if we're looking at, what's called a transit, right? So a transit is when, the planets, as they continue to move, make an aspect with a planet in your chart, right? They make a sacred geometric angle, basically. And so let's say, if we're talking about a hard aspect, let's say that Jupiter is in opposition to Mars in your chart, right? And so a lot of people, out there will say, don't do this, don't do that. I see this every time Mercury retrograde comes out, just go hide underneath a rock and or lock yourself in the bomb shelter.
Is that not true? That's what Sean told me to do.
I just try to get some peace and quiet.
I keep losing so many days every year because of that.
3 times a year for 3 weeks, I hide in the bomb shelter. You do not hear from me.
Yeah, that's what we do.
So I don't like to catastrophize astrological aspects.
Yeah.
So whenever hard aspects come up, so Mercury retrograde would be like a cyclical thing that happens 3 to 4 times a year. It would be an example of a hard aspect, that's happening for all of us as opposed to your personal chart, right? And so whenever hard aspects come up, it's not don't do something. Mm-hmm. It's correct that energy in your life. Mm-hmm. So it's either clearing or corrective in nature. Mm. So it doesn't mean that it's not useful. Mm. Right? It means that if you want to make progress in this area of your life, clean these things up, correct these things, release certain things.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so transits in and of themselves can stimulate healing. Or rather, all of these forecasting techniques, because they bring different themes up for us. Right? And so as we go through life, astrology never stops working for us. There's always something making an aspect to something.
Yeah.
There's always themes that are coming into play. Right. And so as the planets continue moving and they make these different geometric angles to our chart and reveal these different themes, every chance is like peeling a layer of the onion.
Could we consider that being like alchemy of the stars working alchemy on that particular issue?
Absolutely. Well, stimulating the opportunity for alchemy. It depends on our willingness to engage.
Well, that's important to know. because if we do see it that way, is these are opportunities to like where we have extra support during this time, and if you're trying to hide in that bomb shelter, you just miss out on huge opportunities.
Exactly. Or if you're participating in the bombing, you miss out on the opportunity to,
Yeah.
right? Like I gave you the example earlier of Jupiter in opposition to Mars. Well, that can be a chance to look at anger in your life,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yeah.
recklessness,
Yeah.
impetuosity. And so as that theme comes up, you get to assess your relationship with that. Right. And help restore that to balance, because maybe there's still anger, right? Jupiter in this instance is turning up the dial so that you can hear what's still there, because maybe the volume was too low. So you didn't realize that there was still anger simmering beneath the surface about something.
Yeah.
Right. Or maybe you've always considered yourself to be a rational person, but maybe there are certain triggers that get you to be impetuous.
Yeah.
To stick both feet in the fire. And so, you can look at that and consider that. And so as the planets continue to move and make these different geometric angles, we're always being presented with opportunities. Now, that's only hard aspects, because soft aspects can be incredibly healing themselves. Soft aspects can help us to achieve success in life in different areas, or they can be a stimulus for us to engage certain skill sets and to have growth in those areas. Right. And when we have success, when we have growth in areas, that can be incredibly healing as well.
Yeah.
If you've been used to
bad
relationships, and then you meet somebody and you start having a great relationship, isn't that healing?
Yeah, absolutely.
100%. Yeah. And it usually spills over into so many aspects of your life. I mean, kind of like, when you understand a little bit, and that's kind of what the theme of the show is, we even did an episode. It's like healing's never one thing, but one thing will almost always affect multiple aspects and areas. And I mean, when you say that, we've all experienced people that like get in a healthy relationship and you notice like, oh, they show up for work on time now. And they, they actually probably start living outside of those boxes that were created. It's usually the unhappy stuck people that are like, well, my chart says this and now I'm here.
Absolutely. And you're totally right about that. When we experience healing in one area, it very often does spill over into other areas. And I mean, that makes sense, because at the time we're born, there's geometric angles in the chart. Right. So all of these archetypes that we have relationships with each other. And so when you restore light, when you restore quality, when you restore strength to one of those archetypes, that feeds, nourishes, and supports others.
Absolutely.
Right. And so healing is a beautiful thing, because it's not, it's not like when you cut your finger, you heal your finger and it's just the cut on the finger. Right. When we heal those archetypes within ourselves, like you said, that spills over into every area of life. For people who lack confidence, when they suddenly start to have confidence, or, when they've gone through that healing process and they start to see the good in themselves, what area of their life does that not touch?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Kind of excites me. No, when you, because constantly, especially as initiates and people walking a path, like, we're always looking for, at first it's so, sometimes it's really big, right? The overcoming of the early steps. And then you think you know yourself to some degree, but that's when you kind of cut yourself off from knowing yourself more. But then it becomes more subtle. So then you're kind of introducing this aspect where I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to figure out like the next little soft angle that gives me a good advantage to healing. And definitely it always feels like astrology has that. Like the longer we walk the path, the more it has these soft understandings and aspects that are like the details that help us really start to fine tune our development in knowing ourselves, our purpose, our service, all of those things. So really cool.
Yeah. And I mean, there is so much to it. There's your chart can never end in all honesty. You know, I've done like introductory chart readings for you guys for both of you.
Yeah. Well, Sean's can end, right? Sean's can end.
On that note, even Alex, you introduced us to Sumerian astrology, so it was like that was another layer of who I am, and then I have an interest in Celtic astrology now, and that's another layer. I haven't even opened the door to Chinese astrology, but it's really interesting. Like,
wow,
the astrology that I grew up like with, it was never something I was interested in because it just seemed like so surfacey. But you know, it was like this horoscope thing, and you're, you know, like I'm a Sagittarius, this is what your day is going to be. But then once you start to understand, there's so many layers to it. It's like, okay, this is actually like when you look at the whole thing and you put the picture of it all together, like it really does give you a lot of insight into yourself.
Absolutely. Right. And I think one of the things that kills me is that people don't know the original stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you knew the original stories of the stars and the planets, you would understand the significance that they hold for us. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not even just, I'm not even just talking because in ancient times, for example, catching sight of Aldebaran was a reminder, that the floods of the Nile were going to come, and it's like, yay, crops, right? Of course, there was absolute hope that was signified by the rising of different things. But even in terms of our evolution as human beings and who we are and why we're here in this physical world, the stars, the planets, the signs, each of them holds significance for us. And we're not just one of them. All of us are literally all of them. It's just to differing degrees.
Yeah.
We're all a mix of 12 different spices.
I love that.
Yeah.
In varying degrees.
And it even makes sense. Like we're born, we come to this earth, and the stars are a certain arrangement during that time. But then the earth is moving, in relation to the stars every moment of every day. So it's like there's going to be a different relationship that happens when we're 7 years old versus when we were born. And like we still have that original imprint, but things are in a different position versus 5 years later and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And on top of it, what you learn and the wisdom you hold makes a difference too.
Yeah.
Right. And this is why, and it's interesting because even the ancient astrologers talked about this. I was just rereading Ptolemy again. And, and he was talking about how the environment that we are raised in can either support and nourish what's within our chart, or it can work against it.
Yeah.
Gosh. So, that just inspired me to listen to Ava's chart again.
Yeah.
But I mean, even like that understanding of how that environment is like different for each of our, developmental growth and those cycles of the different years and the different planets that are involved. And when I remember when we learned, when we did the Hermetic astrology with you, and there was esoteric you went through and the Hermetic, I just remember feeling like there was so much infusion of understanding through this work that comes about over time. And that it's like anybody who just stopped early, you're not going to keep up with this like relationship of, knowing yourself in the little aspects through that. So I thought that was fantastic. Yeah.
And as you say that, there's a question that pops in my head, and I just have to answer it off the bat, because we talk about know thyself a lot, and what does that help someone to know thyself? Woohoo, I know myself, right? But in order to make good decisions for yourself, in order to support yourself, in order to understand, your priorities and what's important to you in life, you have to know thyself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? When you can look at it from that grounded, tangible way, that know thyself means that you're going to honor your priorities. Knowing thyself means you're going to make good decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing thyself means that you're going to take good care of yourself. You know, that's why we need to know ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it's so helpful with relationships too.
Oh, of course.
And especially, you know, relationships to those that we're close with, and then also like career and that type of thing, because it's like in my chart, for example, there's many different pieces of it being a teacher, which I really enjoy being a student more. So it's like I like to hang out there. And it was something that you just kind of like kept like hammering me with, is like, oh, this is another teacher aspect of you. And if we don't know ourselves, then it's just we can ignore those strengths that we have. But we obviously have those strengths for a reason. So it's really important that we do have awareness of that, because how can we fulfill our potential if we don't?
Yeah.
For sure. Right. You know, if knowledge was a food, I'd say, Sean, don't be a glutton. Share, teach.
Yeah.
That's funny. I mean, I remember there are these moments like when you learn more about this. I remember getting my chart and it's like there's zero Earth. Earth does not exist in it, right? And it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, it's like it just made sense. And I remember another thing that came out of one of our readings, the understanding of like when I build classes, I'm like, this month's always easy for me to build. This month, and you're like, all of those months are air signs. And I was like, oh, that's really
interesting.
Very interesting. Like I'm always successful. Like there's a natural ease of growing and developing and making stuff happen during those times of year. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I should stick to that. And I've dabbled outside of it and it works from some time to time, but there is something of Bill's own magic that occurs within certain months. And I was like, oh, it's like, it was working for me. I knew it. And then there was some greater understanding of it. So that's been cool. And again, like Sean said, with relationships, it's like Lauren is the total opposite of me in so many things. Like if you look from different charts, like Strength Finder, even that analyzes somebody, to astrology, to like, we are so complementary. It's wild. Like she has a lot of things that help ground me and balance me. So it's really fascinating to start to just understand your own aspects of who you are, and then how that relates to astrology is kind of wild, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I love doing relationship charts. I love doing synastry. You know, one of the things that I love about it, you know, again, coming back to this premise that we take ourselves really personally. You know, we're very subjective when it comes to ourselves. It's the funniest thing. And we do the same thing in relationships.
Yeah.
And so what I love about doing synastry and relationship charts is that, you know, I get to stand there and say, this is how you need to understand each other. These are the strengths of your relationship. And these are the areas in which you're likely to find conflict. But one of the things you need to understand about conflict is that, you know, from the premise of astrology, conflict is the grounds for future peace.
Cool.
Conflict is the grounds by which the relationship becomes closer.
Maybe you can help us understand our election more with that, you know?
Crossing my fingers on that one. Well, the thing is, conflict can be the grounds for future peace, or it can be the grounds for more conflict.
That's true. That's a good point.
Choice.
Yeah.
But when you understand and have a deeper understanding without taking it personally, you know, having that knowledge outside of yourselves, and being able to understand the needs and wants of each other, and sometimes even of themselves. You know, you'd be surprised at how many times I do like a synastry chart, or even when I'm just doing a natal chart and I talk about people's needs and relationships, and they go, oh,
yeah.
You know, and it's like you just see the light bulb go right over their head, and they come to that realization. It's like they've collected a lot of experimental data through their life experience, and I come in and say, yes, all of that is this conclusion, and they go, oh.
Yeah.
From a dynamics perspective, like this is all kind of new to me. When you do a relationship one, do you typically do like an individual and then bring them together and kind of be like, this is it? Or do you kind of do all the groundwork ahead of time before you present to the relationship what they should know or be aware of?
So the premise behind the synastry chart is it works with the Hermetic principle of gender. So looking at the masculine and feminine flow of energy between a couple.
Cool. Oh, wow.
Right. And so primarily you're looking at aspects between the personal planets. So the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Okay. And you're looking at how they interact with each other. And so hopefully what you see, are positive dynamics between the masculine and the feminine within both charts. Okay. Because all of us have masculine and feminine within our charts. As I said, we're not just one archetype, right? And so we have our femininity and we have our masculinity, no matter what your sex is, right? And so we look at the interaction between the masculine and feminine in both charts. And so the masculine of person A, and the feminine of person B. And then the feminine of person B and the masculine of, the masculine of person A and the feminine of person B, right? And so hopefully you see positive interactions between them with a little bit of pepper, with a little bit of conflict, because a relationship that's too easy doesn't go deep. It's too facile. It's superficial, right? And so there needs to be a little bit of conflict, because ideally a relationship helps us to step outside of our boxes and learn and grow.
Yes. I'm feeling everything you're saying. I'm sure there's a lot of pepper. No,
but I'm telling you, conflict from an astrological perspective, and from a Hermetic perspective, conflict is the grounds for future peace. The premise in synastry, is that we don't start off on the same trajectory, right? One person's coming from this trajectory and somebody's coming from this one. Conflict is the inevitable collision that happens when you are on different trajectories. And so what happens, is we collide, but then we adjust our trajectory slightly. And then inevitably we collide again. And so we adjust our trajectory slightly, right? And so every time we have the opportunity to adjust our trajectory to be in greater alignment with each other, or we can collide and bounce off of each other. And that's when the relationship ends.
That's a great visual of of how that really works. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, with that friction is like how we climb, right?
Yeah. And that friction is what also leads to passion.
Yeah. Totally.
Right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
If your wife agreed with everything you said,
it would be so boring. Yeah. And she doesn't, which is good. It's good. No, I've totally learned to like really embrace this. And I remember I heard some younger person recently say something along the lines like, oh man, I don't understand long-term relationships, because how do you know how do you know that person's going to be the same? And it's like, that's never been the point, right? Like to find a person that like you like, and it's going to stay that way. And it's like, I've definitely with Lauren, especially, our paths came together, collided, and then initiation took it kind of to the next level, because I thought I was getting out. I thought I was going somewhere else. And it's like, my life was never supposed to be without that collision and refinement and understanding is like, it's been one of the greatest blessings to have. And Lauren said early in our relationship was like, I never fought with anybody as much as nobody ever fought with me. Like nobody.
Mhm.
And then we come in and we're like working stuff out all the time, but not in a way that was like a problem. We were just getting to an understanding. So I can see that very readily in my life of how that's very true. So that's a cool visual that you just painted for everyone. That's awesome. I feel like I've never heard you even talk about this.
I don't think I have either.
Talk about it. You know what?
That's
like,
because you haven't had a synastry reading with me.
I haven't, but like, I mean, people that are listening to this, that's like such a great service, because, you know, people who know that there's more to each themselves and their partner, like this, that's such a cool way to like look at how you're coming up against each other in a way that can help create some harmony between the differences, as opposed to just absorbing them and dealing with it, you know? It's really cool.
And again, to just not personalize the conflict.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have different values, or sometimes you have different perceptions of things, right? And one partner might be catching something that the other partner's missing, say in decisions together, right? And so when you have that reminder to honor those strengths or those differences in perception or different needs, right? It reminds you that you're a team. Right? That there's love there.
Yeah. Maybe you should do a synergy one for Sean and I, so we can continue to do better at this. Maybe we should fight more. Do you think we should fight more, Alex?
We'll just give it time.
It's too easy to get along with.
You should put some boxing gloves on and just pretend to punch each other on screen.
Oh, that'd be fun.
I think it'd be pretty amazing.
It would be more interesting. We need a little more conflict. So we need conflicting guests.
Alex, I actually want to ask if you could share a little bit about activation initiation as far as how that relates to our astrology readings.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like for some people, they may be hitting up against roadblocks as far as, they're like, maybe I don't want to, I'm a Taurus, but I don't want to be so stubborn, but it does seem to be part of my nature. How do I overcome this?
Yeah. So every time I do an astrology reading for somebody who hasn't received life activation and initiation, I always tell them to do it. So off the bat, it's funny. I said this to somebody last week and he booked because I said this one thing. I wish I could activate the world. And he's like, really? I said, yeah. Oh, okay. Can I come and see you on Tuesday? It was great. Yeah. But you come in with strengths, abilities, areas of wisdom. And in your life, you don't always get to explore all of it.
Yeah.
And so what happens is parts of that shut down. Right? You could think of it as some of the best parts of yourself go into hiding. And when you receive the life activation, what you are doing is you are lighting your whole self up again. So that those strengths, those talents, those areas of wisdom that are part of you and are part of your purpose can start to show themselves again. And not only are they lit up so that they're visible for you, so that you recognize that they're there, but also you hook them up to a massive battery.
Yeah.
So that you also have the energy to actually embrace that and to give it expression and the joy and the excitement to do so. Right. And so the life activation amplifies the best of you. And when the best of you is visible and available and ready to rock, it is so much easier not to indulge in the lower aspects of the personality.
Yeah.
It's really good.
In the trappings of the negative ego, basically. Right? When you can see that you can be this strong, incredible person, or that you can be incredibly abundant, or that you're an amazing teacher, why would you engage in whatever ego egoic traps are keeping you from that.
Yeah.
Right. And even if you do, because here's the thing, it's not like, it's not like one and done, perfect. You're never going to indulge that again.
Yeah.
Right. But rather, you're far less inclined.
Yeah.
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 Life activation and initiation are a process that Alice Bailey called the dual work of the initiate. And so through life activation and initiation, yes, we minimize the negative ego, right? But we also are embracing the positive.
Yeah.
And so there's this dual effect, of suppression and expansion. And I don't even want to say suppression, clearing and expansion.
Yeah.
I think would be a better term, right? And so the life activation kickstarts that process. And then the other piece to it is that initiation in particular really helps to put you in contact with not only the universal powers that you need at your disposal, in order to fulfill whatever your purpose is, but really and truly, it helps you to hold connection with those celestial forces and the celestial beings that are going to help you to maintain that higher wisdom. Right? We live, our world, astrologers call it the mundane world. Right? There's what's called mundane astrology, and that deals with the mundane, right? And so here we are in a world of mundane, and in a society that loves the mundane. It's kind of funny. It said that before we come into this world, we drink of the cup of oblivion, and we become intoxicated by matter. We drink this, we partake of this cup from Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy, right? And also hedonism, actually. And so we drink of this cup, and we come into this world, and we become enchanted with the physical. And so that proves to be our downfall, because it is that blocks us from knowing ourselves. Right? And so with initiation, we really embark on that process of what the ancient Greeks called remembering. When they learned philosophy, when they were having their discussions and their lectures, and in ancient Greece and in the Pythagorean schools, they didn't call it learning. They called it remembering.
I love that.
Awesome.
They called it remembering because it was something we knew as spirit. And then we got drunk with Dionysus on our way down here. Intoxicated by matter. It's so bad that we've forgotten who we are. Right?
It's cool.
And don't always care to find out.
That too.
Right? And part of the condition of that drunkenness is that we form a lot of opinions, like drunk people do. Right?
True.
And so with initiation, we're able to maintain that connection to spirit. That's who we are. We are not the conditions of our physical life. We are not the personality traits that we have formed. They may be the funhouse mirror version of who we are in spirit, right? Because our personality traits are not completely negative, right? They can just be misleading impressions of who we really are. Right? Like I joke about the funhouse mirror, but it's true. And so we need to maintain that higher perspective. Otherwise, we give into oblivion. And we think poorly of ourselves. And that never serves. Right? And so through initiation, not only do we have the chance for that higher perspective, for that continued communication with the divine, of which we come from, of which we are a part, right? But we also have the chance to develop the connection, the skills, the intuitive abilities, the power to manifest.
Mm.
And so that's exactly what initiation brings.
Mm.
And so your astrology chart just hints to the direction, hints to what are those celestial qualities, what are those heavenly traits that you brought down with you.
Mm.
Because even though you came down drunk, you didn't come alone.
That's like the best quote. That's
Yeah.
good. We're going to put that as the title.
You didn't come drunk, or sorry, you came drunk, but you didn't come alone.
Yeah, that's going to be the name of this episode with Alex Ceho. That's awesome.
So good.
No,
I'm so
it
glad that
won't-
was recorded because it was just such a good share that you just did.
Yeah, it was that was really awesome. With that being said, like, if people want to start to explore astrology, let's say this like 2-part questions. If people really want to start to explore astrology, what do you recommend? And number 2, if they want to explore knowing themselves with you, like doing a reading, a chart, what's the best way to go about doing that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So when it comes to astrology, I'm going to be honest. There are no good introductory books.
Okay.
I'm going to be perfectly honest about that, because most of what's out there just gives you these like charts or lists, and Taurus is this and Cancer is this and Sagittarius is this, right? So I'm going to be honest. I have a blog. I teach astrology in the 7 sacred planets, which is the introductory class to astrology. But also in the mystery school, one of the things that people don't know or understand is that astrology is one of 3 hermetic sciences. And so Hermes Trismegistus was thrice blessed or thrice great, right? Trismegistus, because he was the master of alchemy, astrology, and ritual magic. And so, in all honesty, even attending Empower Thyself, you learn so much about the magic behind astrology, because you begin to learn about the elements. And not only do you begin to learn about them, it's not, you're not given a list of qualities, you actually experience them. Right. And so, so you actually get to experience them, which gives you an in-depth knowledge above and beyond what you can find in a book.
Cool.
Right. And so I would absolutely recommend attending the Empower Thyself program. And then we have the Universal Hermetic Ray Kabbalah. And there's so many correspondences, that are connected to that. Right. And then whenever you see astrology in the 7 sacred planets up, I would absolutely encourage you to jump in, because what we do is we actually talk about the original stories behind and the original meanings and energies behind the zodiac signs and the planets. Because even in the planetary symbols, there's a secret language, right? You guys remember, you were both in that class, and so there's a difference between what Venus means versus what Jupiter means, because they're composed of different symbols.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then in terms of getting a chart reading, I would be honored to do a chart reading for pretty much anyone and everyone. I'm going to treat you all like royalty, and I'm going to be your top advisor.
Awesome.
And so if anyone is interested in a reading, you're welcome to visit my webpage, masterthestars.com.
Cool.
And so there's a whole selection of readings there. And
Awesome.
so if you want to know more about yourself or your relationship, or if you have things you want to manifest, there's forecasting that you can work with. So there's lots of goodies there.
That's awesome. Yeah. And we'll be sure to put it in the show notes, so people have a link to your website so they can check it out. Because, this forecasting each year is awesome. And I know people can be a part of that. And then, my recommendation, anybody that I talk to who's really interested in going deeper, I'm always like, a reading really just does help you get a much greater understanding of the basics surrounding astrology and how it relates to you. Because, that's kind of a great way to start, right? With any part of the path. We teach that in Empower Thyself. Like, you got to start to understand yourself before you go serve another. And that's such a great way to start to have a relationship with astrology that's beyond just the mundane, if you will. Right.
Yeah.
And when people do a reading with you too, they like you send the recording, and then there's also the picture chart, so you can see like the different planetary arrangement, and then the written down aspect, which is really helpful. So that's good.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm always encouraging people to begin studying at some point, and so I always send off your chart because that's the best thing to study.
Yeah.
And I do in-depth sessions, so I don't expect people to remember everything they say.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And so I always send a recording afterwards, because like you both mentioned, people come back to me and say, "Oh my God, I just listened to it again. And, now I get what you mean."
Yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome.
And related to what just before we wrap up, with when people are wanting to understand the planets, like they're really wanting to understand these celestial forces.
Yeah.
So these are such high spiritual frequencies. And when we're down in this physical density, we're not fully grasping the totality of those energies. So we really have to lift our energy way, 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 way up to these much higher levels, which is what the path of initiation does. And activation is the doorway to doing that. So I haven't, like when I see you, Alex, when I've seen you teaching, it's like you just hold those essence of the planets, like you hold the frequency. And I've not seen very many people do that. Like I really think you need those higher initiations to be able to even just reach up that high in terms of frequency to really like wield the energy of the planets and connect with those forces and channel them into your life in a way that best serves you.
Yeah. If you think of the planets as having a spectrum, right? Our vibration dictates whether we get the best or the purest aspect of that celestial force, or if we get, I guess you could say, the crumbled version, right? And so when we're not coinciding, then we get the crumbles.
Yeah.
But through activation, through initiation, we actually raise our vibration so that we can have greater coincision, so that we can access the purity of that force, so that it can be a constructive force in our life. And so that we can have a cleaner relationship with it, so that it manifests as positive things.
I love that.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's really great.
And that's the beautiful thing, is that that's possible for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. That's so good, Alex.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. When you produce a show, it's like you don't want to go back and like ever listen to yourself, but this like, and there's always time where we like producing, but there's like so much here that I want to go back and like go through. So I'm grateful that you took some time out of your busy schedule to be with us and share this knowledge, because we don't know of anybody else who could capture it nearly to the degree that you have. So, maybe we'll probably have you down the line. Maybe you can even do a little bit of like a mini forecast
That'd be cool.
That would be fun.
Yeah. So we can like give
for the election.
November 4th. That's like right at programs. Probably won't work. We'll do it the week before. You can give us your who's gonna win and why and what we need to do to not fall apart as a country. So thank you.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, that would be great.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah, thanks. We need that.
And we'll write this down, but the website is mastersofthestars.com. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Awesome.
And then that's the best way for people to contact you.
Yes.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
So good. Well, thank you so much. And we look forward to sharing this out to everybody. And if you're looking forward to or looking for more information, definitely reach out to Alex. Wealth of knowledge. And it's a great place to start to continue to grow. So
thank you so much for having me on, guys. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody.